Hello and welcome to the show. I'm here on Project Cars 2 today driving a Can-Am car. This is the Porsche 917. Now, Can-Am cars themselves are pretty ridiculous pieces of machinery. There was a big old power war, little in the way of regulations, restrictions in the series. Everyone went a little bit mad. This car has over 1,000 horsepower, and the other Can-Am cars had similar levels. They're ludicrous, they look mad, and in the best of conditions, they are very, very tough to drive. I am not going to be driving this car in the best of conditions. I'm going to be taking it to the Nurburgring in the snow. Oh yeah, and I have one lap. My goal is to try and beat the time set by an Audi hatchback. The little Audi S1 drove around here in a 9 minutes 22. Now, in the dry, of course, the Porsche would have no trouble obliterating the Audi. But on snow, this is going to be tough. This is going to be tough. Also, I shall show you, point out, turbos. Big old turbos on this car. I've got the boost pressure set to 100%. Now, I believe the 1,000 horsepower in this car is made with the standard setup, which is the turbos running at 75%. So, we have huge amount of power going through the rear wheels, on snow, on ice, with a lot of that power coming from quite high up and probably quite savagely in the rev range. This is going to be difficult, is the word that I am going to use to describe the Porsche. Now, admittedly, yes, as I said, this does have incredible amounts of power. We're probably not going to use a lot of it. Why? I simply can't. You simply cannot use 1,200 horsepower in this condition. Not whatsoever. It's just not going to work. I will have to be incredibly careful. Oh, that's a lot of understeer. I'll have to be incredibly careful with the throttle. I will short shift a lot. To that end, there is actually a couple of advantages in some ways to this car. First of all, and perhaps primarily for me here, long gear ratios. It will allegedly do 220 miles an hour and only has a 4-speed gearbox. Now, to do that, it would have to have some very long gear ratios, and that's good for me in terms of throttle control. That's very good for me in terms of throttle control. It means I can short shift and I can find a place in the throttle positioning much easier to get some power down, but not all of the power immediately. We don't want all of the power immediately, because that's how you end up having a spin. The other advantage I do have, of course, is while, yes, this is an older race car and not the most sophisticated compared to modern-day vehicles, still a race car. Still going to be downforce. The faster I go, the more grip I'm going to have. We're up to 150 miles an hour. That's terrifying. The way that picks up speed, I assume I've just started activating the turbos as we were going down there. We got to the point in the rev range, because it wasn't really accelerating very quickly because I was having to be so tentative with it, and then it suddenly starts going. If that catches you out at a wrong point, we are a goner, I feel. If we get those turbos even just a tiny bit too soon or a tiny bit unexpectedly, I have a feeling that will probably be us in a world of trouble. I'm also quite wary of the crests. I'm also quite wary of the curbs even here, because if we get a little bit airborne, combine that with a little bit of a turbo wanting to say hello, I have a feeling the Porsche is going to go round in a circle. Now, it doesn't look very dramatic, this. This really doesn't look very dramatic whatsoever so far. But, in my attempts at surviving this lap, I think it is going to have to not look dramatic. Because a millimetre too much, throttle usage, and suddenly those turbos will appear. They will dump the power out the rear of the car, and it's going to spin. Yeah, and because it's such a quick car, it's going to spin at a relatively high speed, and you're not going to be able to control it. As I said, yeah, the faster I go, the more grip I have, the more downforce works, the more it pushes the car into the road and so on. But a lot of these corners, even in the dry, you'll struggle to take that quickly. And then when we are at these slow speeds, there's nothing. In fact, this has got some of the worst understeer I think I've driven around here. The front doesn't turn in whatsoever. So, yeah, there is gonna have to be a lot of caution in this car because of the savagery of those of those turbos. I mean, and I say the savagery of the turbos, even just the cornering grip isn't amazing. A little bit like we saw with the Lotus that went out last time. And the Lotus didn't have the traction issues or the turbo issues. It was a turbine car. Very, very different way of delivering power and so on. And yeah, that was all-wheel drive. That struggled around here so much because the front end actually didn't turn into any corners at all. They just couldn't get the front end to go into a corner. This is suffering surprisingly similar things at these lower speed corners, and I can't run into that corner faster because I won't go fast enough to generate the downforce because it's, you know, quite a tight corner, and then we're left on snow, on ice with no grip. So yeah, we've got to be really careful. There will be opportunities for this car. Oh no, that was the turbo. I was starting to find a little bit of speed there, and we went over a crest. Wasn't enough to get airborne, but it just unloaded the car, and that was enough to start suggesting that we might get some wheel spin out of the vehicle. As smoothly does it. This is a fast section here, and when we can potentially get up to speed, this car is going to be quick. This car is going to be mighty fast. While the ice tyres, the snow tyres will... the added friction from these tyres will slow the car's ultimate top speed down. It's still going to be damn fast. I don't know how fast. I look forward to finding out when we come to that main straight. There was a little bit of turbos saying hello there, and as soon as they say hello, that's sign to change up gear quite quickly. No, even when that's not even turbo related. That was just, I think we hit a curb. Come on, recover it. No, that was turbos. It's the Red Bull was barely drivable around here for a very different reason. Primarily, it didn't actually go in a straight line. This does go in a straight line, but in some ways I preferred the Red Bull. Even with the Red Bull being a ludicrous turbo rotary engine, in some ways I preferred the Red Bull to this so far. It's just... It's just the abruptness and the fact that if you... Well, I can't touch a curb, basically, with this car. Not if we're at any sort of high speeds. I can't touch a curb. I can barely deal with the crests. So we go over a bump at a slightly awkward angle at a slightly wrong point in the rev range, and that's... you're done for. In fact, actually, if we go over a bump, I'm better off just not being on throttle whatsoever. If I can, like, predict when we're going to find a bump where we're going to end up... Again, not airborne, just unloaded the rear of the car and so on. Just get off the throttle immediately, and you might stand a chance of surviving, because if I'm even slightly on that throttle, we run a huge, huge risk. Now, in terms of the time, that crash, even in some ways the recovery from the crash, isn't the worst loss of time that we could have around here. I think just about everything's had a little bit of an explore moment at some point around this circuit, so we might still be able, we should still be okay. It wasn't a big spin, we didn't have to grab reverse to get the car sort of, you know, back around. Now we're coming into the real horrible bits. This is where it gets very technical, where the downforce will count for nothing. And where it starts getting quite... oh, that's not fun either. I just went into a corner and the back end's just decided it's coming round. I think I've got to be really careful. I think we might have maybe too much rear brake bias. I don't know if we're locking the rear or whether... actually, it might have even been me steering a fraction while braking. If that's the case, that's very sensitive to... well, to steering when braking. I know, of course, you know, you're not supposed to steer when you're braking, etc. In an ideal world, you wouldn't. There are times when you're going to have to, and I'm sure I have done in this series so far. This feels like the most sensitive to that, 'cause I don't even think I had a downshift in there. So, yeah, gotta be mighty, mighty careful here. And then we're just gonna kind of have to coast our way through. Coast our way through all of that. We're gonna come up over the crest. Can I get some power down out the other side? I'd like to get some speed out of the car. I just can't. That's why I can't. That was a crest. And I mean, that was at what, 80 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour? I caught it through sheer... well, I knew what to do, and I kind of just hoped that it would work. I would say sheer luck. I obviously did do the right inputs to save it, but it was thanks to, you know, where I was positioned in the road and everything. It was ridiculous. Oh, we come up to the 8-minute mark. We've got the straight to go and a few more corners. can we beat the 9:22 lap time? Now, we are going to make up stacks of time on the Audi. Again, I have no doubt, actually, that up until this point, just about everything has been behind the Audi. However, we are very, very, very quick, theoretically at least, down this straight. And I'm hoping I might actually be able to get to full throttle in this car for the first time, because I still haven't been able to, and I'm still not really daring. Here we go. We are on the straight now. Still not daring getting to that full throttle. Can we? Oh, it is actually now starting to move around. The car is bouncing around down the straight. It's not quite as bad as the Red Bull, but it's still pretty damn terrifying. We are up towards 200 miles an hour. We're 204 miles an hour on snow. I'm having to lift there. I don't know if that could have done it. It couldn't, because that's 150 and we've let go. Okay, we could not have done that at 200 miles an hour, because, yeah, at 150, that was all sorts of in trouble. We've made up a little bit of our own line through there. We are not going to beat the Audi. Neither are we going to beat the Zonda. Come on, Porsche. We've had all of that speed and now there's nothing in terms of turning through there. Oh, come on. What are we going to do lap time wise? It's going to be a 9:33. That is a very, very, very difficult car to drive. I think that's probably the most difficult one I've had so far. Because when the turbos say hello, that is you done. That is just you. You done. The lap time, the 9:33, will put the car into a 5th place. It does beat the Sauber C9, it does beat the Red Bull, and considerably faster than the Sierra, losing out to the V8 Supercar. I mean, we're some 11 seconds down on the Audi S1. It's terrifying, quite frankly. It's not just even the turbos that are the scary part in this car. The overall lack of grip in many ways is difficult to deal with. The front end doesn't turn in at low speeds. The back end, I mean, I wasn't paying massive attention, but the back end can do that. No, the front end doesn't turn at low speed. The back end lets go even when we're not dealing with turbo suddenly kicking up power. Crests, bumps, curbs, anything, you touch those and you can end up in so much trouble with this car. And that's before you start adding in the turbos suddenly depositing power. I was having to be very cautious with that throttle because it's just going to spin the wheels. And as soon as you start spinning the wheels with this much power and this, I say, little control, you're going to visit scenery. It is our fastest car down the straight, I believe. The first car to have cracked the 200 mile an hour mark, which is cool and everything. But very, very terrifying with it. That, though, is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.